wetu. Kazama yuti bonse bachinda be abakulu n'abaana. Bonse bashitata n'abaana bayo banelirawe Mwamba. Kazama ile fire iwe wile webo weshi Mwamba. Later experience olakale wabo Mwamba Emmanuel. Bonse bakasama bale fire Mwamba Emmanuel. Bakasama bakulira tule fire Mwamba wesu Emmanuel. Chipani ni PF tule fire Mwamba wesu Emmanuel. Wakuito mwele Emmanuel Mwamba ambassador Emmanuel. Tule fire Emmanuel Mwamba ambassador Emmanuel. Olakale wabomba Mwamba Emmanuel. Bonse bakasama bale fire Mwamba Emmanuel. Bakasama bakulira tule fire Mwamba wesu Emmanuel. Chipani ni PF tule fire Mwamba wesu Emmanuel. Wakuito mwele Emmanuel Mwamba ambassador Emmanuel. Tule fire Emmanuel Mwamba ambassador Emmanuel. Bakasama bakulira tule fire Mwamba wesu Emmanuel. Tule fire Mwamba wesu Emmanuel. Emmanuel Mwamba ambassador Emmanuel. Emmanuel Mwamba ambassador.
Good day. We saw the Vice President appear on Radio Phoenix, Madam W.K. Mtalena Lumango, respond to various issues affecting the country. The other day, we saw the Minister of Agriculture, Honorable Mtolo Piri, allege that government has finished the distribution of fertilizer countrywide. We saw remarks from the Minister of Energy, where they are stating that load shedding may have come to an end. This is what we want. When the opposition raise issues, we want government to attend to the issues we've raised and also respond, clarify, put government position on the matters that we raise. The purpose of the opposition, the purpose of our voices is to speak to the on behalf of the people, speak to government bravely, courageously, and raise the issues that are affecting our people. So I love the pushback by government, frequent and responding to the issues we are raising. So on today's brief, we've decided to discuss 3 items. We are discussing the cancellation of the concession contract for the management of the dry port facility at Walvis Bay in Namibia. We'll also discuss the recent debacle around the IMF. You are aware that the extended credit facility that was given to Zambia to the tune of $1.3 billion loan may not come to pass. It's been 16 months and the money is nowhere to be seen. And lastly, we'll discuss issues around the recent fuel increment and the decision by the Central Bank, Bank of Zambia, to raise bank reserve ratio, where it will be raised to about from 9% to 11.5%. This is to, I think, reduce money circulation in the country. Let's start with the issue of the cancellation of the concession contract for the management of the dry port facility at Walvis Bay in Namibia. You have to remember where the country is coming from. As Zambia, we supported liberation movements. We supported ANC from South Africa. We supported SWAPO from Namibia. We supported MPLA and UNITA at one time from Angola. We supported Frelimo from Mozambique. We also supported ZANU and ZAP from Zimbabwe. We also supported other liberation movements from far-flung countries such as East Timor, Palestine, and other countries. So Zambia had a good reputation. Some nations decided to pay back. Namibia, for example, as soon as they got independence, they got most of our senior staff from the civil service and judges to go and help run their country, establish their country. So you had State House and the judiciary and the civil service run by Zambians here, and Namibia was, most of all these liberation movements, headquarters were in Lusaka. So it was just natural that Namibia could ask for that help. Namibia has been one of the most countries that have rewarded or acknowledged publicly how Zambia helped them attain national independence. So it is to this extent that they gave Dr. Kaunda a house, remember they announced, and they gave Zambia a port facility. They gave them a piece of land which Zambia could use as a port facility. So recently, you heard when the president was visiting Namibia that the High Commissioner, Zambia's High Commissioner to Namibia, His Excellency Stephen Katuta, announced that Zambia had cancelled the contract for the management of the dry port facility. Who manages this dry port facility? It is the businessman, business mogul, multi-billionaire known as James Ndambo. He's been running it from 2009. The High Commissioner claimed in his statement that this was due to alleged poor performance and underutilization of the facility. Let's discuss this matter. When Zambia was given this land in 1990, remember we have similar land, for example, across in Tanzania, where we have port facility at Dar es Salaam, where Tazama can dock, where Tazara ends. We have such connections on Dar Port, where Zambia has facilities and terminals at Dar Port, on similar arrangement as given by Namibia. But Zambia from 1990 to 2009 didn't develop this port. So James Ndambo, being a businessman, being an entrepreneur, identified the land and went to the Namibian authority and went into an agreement, and he was granted to run the port. This was 19 years after Zambia was given the port, which we didn't utilize, we didn't develop it, we didn't attend to it. It remained bare land for 19 years. So Ndambo went and began the development. He has since put up facilities in excess of $5 to $7 million. He has put up port handling facilities, he has put up an office complex, he has put up warehousing facilities, he has a lot of equipment, heavy duty equipment to handle cargo and shipping, docking and the way they handle cargo. By 2013, I think President Michael Sat, after his visit to Namibia, heard about this port and later sent in a technical team led by the permanent secretary and others to go and understand what was happening to the Zambian port at Walvis Bay. And remember, SADC, we are discussing routes and trade routes that should make it easier for intra-trade between ourselves, between the 19 SADC countries and African Union member states, and for countries like ourselves that are landlocked, making them land-linked. And other than Dar es Salaam, Durban, Beira, Walvis Bay, Lobito Bay in Angola are part of our trade routes that we've been saying we should develop in our national plans and in the regional plans by SADC and the African Union. So Zambia was naturally interested in this port that allegedly belonged to itself. And the team established the facts that, yes, Zambia was given this land, but Zambia never pursued this matter. Zambia never processed the titles to this land. And Mr. Ndambo and African Union Cargo had an arrangement with Namibian Port, Namport, to run this facility. And they had signed a contract. So Zambia began then to engage Mr. Ndambo in 2013. And this resulted by 2016 with a memorandum of understanding where the government then said they will concession this port to Mr. Ndambo, and they will give him both the concession and the management of the dry port facility at Walvis Bay. So what exists at the moment is an MOU between African Union Cargo and the Zambian government on one hand, and Mr. Ndambo's binding contract with Namibian port facilities. Now, I'm deliberately naming contract and MOU. The Zambian MOU with Mr. Ndambo, where he's supposed to pay a royalty fee because this land should belong to Zambia, is an MOU you don't have to be a lawyer to understand that an MOU is not binding, it's not legally binding, it's not legally enforceable. What is enforceable is a contract. So where is the contract? Mr. Ndambo and his company, African Union Cargo, have a contract with Namibian port. There lies an issue here. Can Zambian government cancel a contract which it is not party to? Because the Zambian government is not party to the contract between African Union Cargo and the Namibian port. The Zambian government have a contract with Mr. Ndambo's company, not a contract, an MOU. So clearly there is no validity to the cancellation. It should be very, very clear. And we all know the cancellation has risen after Mr. Ndambo held a pageant in Choma in July. There is nothing else that has happened other than that pageant, which annoyed President Hakainde Hichilema and his government, which annoyed to the clear persecution of Mr. Ndambo. And the cancellation of the Namibian the port facilities at Walvis Bay just is part of that issue. And also of interest is Brentes Foundation, who have done a detailed documentary, and their executive director, Mr. Greg Mills, actually started his journey from Northwestern Province at First Quantum Mines from Rwanda, from Kansanshi, and he went by road following the tracks that carry copper up to Walvis Bay. And he analyzed that of the 5 routes available to Zambia, export routes: Dar es Salaam, Durban, Beira, and Walvis Bay, and Lobito Bay in Angola. Walvis Bay was the most suited because the road in Namibia was a very good road. So other than the bad patches in Zambia between Solwezi, if you are going through Kaoma, to Mongu, to Sesheke, and you enter Katimamulilo, the Namibian route is far more efficient because you are just dealing with one border at Sesheke and Katimamulilo. For the other borders, like Durban, you have to go through Zimbabwe, then you go to South Africa, and then the risks around truckers and copper transporters in South Africa. So he recommended in that document to the Zambian government that the best route is Walvis Bay. And who's Brentes Foundation? Well, they're at State House, they're advising President Hichilema's foreign policy, they're supporting technical and advisory staff at State House. You can see where this cancellation is coming from. It's coming from, not from inefficiency, not from failure to utilize land, not failure of incompetence as alleged by the statement. It's clearly driven by ulterior motives. So we are yet to see. I don't see any effect to the decision of government to cancel a contract that they do not have, to cancel a concession that doesn't exist. An MOU is really not legally binding. Let's go to the issue of the IMF. Well, you saw the statement. I think it was precipitated by the statement from Janet Yellen, the US Secretary of Treasury, when she visited Zambia. She accused China of bungling the debt and debt restructure and debt forgiveness that Zambia is pursuing. And China responded. We all responded that I think the statements were careless, that the US should preoccupy itself with matters of Zambia and US relations, and they shouldn't meddle us. They shouldn't put us on the spot with our relationship with China. So China now has given a comprehensive response. You have to remember that there's a framework under the G20 where we have this debt service suspension initiative, where we have not been paying our debt. We are not servicing our debt because of the G20 framework. We applied for what people have been calling a default. There are 48 countries that are doing that. And of the 48 countries, there are 3 countries under IMF that are negotiating under the G20 framework for debt restructure. So they are like the pioneers, and IMF is very keen for this to succeed. The countries are Zambia, Chad, and Ethiopia. And For Zambia and Ethiopia, the bulk of their debt, up to a third of their debt, is with the Chinese government or Chinese institutions. For Chad, their biggest debt is with a private company, Glencore. So in whichever you're looking at, the debt restructuring program has been complicated, not by the presence of sovereigns, but by the lack of presence of sovereign. China has said, we have come to the table. We are co-chair with France, who's representing the Paris Club, the European Union and others. And then you have private creditors and China on the other hand with its banks. China has said, you want us to provide a haircut, meaning you want us to forgive Zambia's debt to a certain extent, sometimes up to 80%. What about you? So China has asked multilateral institutions and multilateral development banks in World Bank, IMF, Africa Development Bank, European Investment Bank, that they should also do what they are asking China to do. Cancel Zambia's debt, forgive Zambia's debt. They can't carry the burden alone. And they're asking also private creditors that Zambia owes, whether it's Eurobond, or whether it is Mr. Mikarile, who we owe $300 million. They are saying everyone should carry the same burden. Now look at the challenge. Will Mr. Mikarile cancel his $300 million debt? He can't. He's a private businessman, and he arranged for that facility. With the Eurobond, which consists of numerous lenders who put together their money, some are pensioners, some are ordinary savers, who put their money and gave it to an investor entity that invested in the Eurobond, cancel their debt. It's not possible. For IMF, World Bank, Africa Development Bank, and the others we call international financial institutions, or multilateral lenders, their problem is because they have a credit status and their loans are quite very low, low rates. So they are not allowed to cancel debt. They are not allowed to restructure debt. They do not participate in the restructuring of debt. So what this means is that if the restructuring process was successful, if China forgave our debt and some private sectors forgave our debt, we will still continue to pay what we owe World Bank, IMF, Africa Development Bank, European Investment Bank. It is this issue where China is calling for equity. It's this issue where China is saying we cannot carry the debt burden for Zambia alone. Where are you? Besides, you are the one that are pushing us, all of us, to cancel this debt and restructure it. Lead by example. So we want to Wakwalesa, IMF bailout, $1.3 billion that were given may not come due to those challenges. Remember, the money is premised on various conditions, and one of them was the debt restructure. It's one of the key components to the IMF to unlock that $1.3 billion. So, hence you saw the anger from the US government, you saw the anger from the IMF, all of them placing burden on China. It's not China alone, it's them collectively. And I think China has raised a moral pedestal. While the G20, while IMF and World Bank, while the US cry loudest that forgive China, your loans are predatory. Now, whose loans are predatory? Whose loans are being failed to be written off? The last item I want us to discuss is the recent changes in the fuel and the changes by the central bank. Clearly, Zambians will not afford this high cost of living. They are barely surviving. Everything is very expensive. Fuel, petrol, diesel literally, which runs the economy, because heavy-duty trucks, heavy-duty vehicles all run on diesel, and it's very expensive now at 28 Kwacha. The cost of food, cooking oil, sugar, salt, everything is just very expensive for our people. And then you come and increase this fuel. Our call has been to government is that don't listen to the IMF. Provide some subsidies to key sectors. The agriculture sector needs subsidies. You have to provide. That's a role of government, to look after your people. It's not to throw your people to the wolves. Similarly, fuel is a serious component. You have to find a mechanism where it doesn't hurt our people most. And you know that if fuel increases, everything else increases. The central bank has a runaway problem. The exchange rate, the Kwacha, has grown its own legs. There is no leash that is holding the Kwacha. Just 3 months ago, it was at 16 Kwacha. Now it's at 19.3. It's the worst performing currency in the world. From the best performing currency just last year, it's now the worst performing currency. And the central bank is grappled with how to handle this. So now they've put up this reserve ratio where they've directed banks to raise deposits, statutory deposits that banks are ordered to retain with the central bank. These deposits could be in foreign exchange, could be in vostro accounts, where banks have their money or customers' money in another bank, and the deposits that they have, they've raised this ratio to 11.5%. In short, they have reduced money supply further, as if the 9.5% wasn't already a difficult one. What this means is that, number one, there is little money available for lending by banks. And if there's little money by banks to lend it out, it means money will become more expensive to lend out, because now there will be more competition. It will be difficult for them to provide those overdrafts because they are ordered by central bank to retain, of all the money they have, a certain percentage, up to 11.5% in the central bank. We are dealing with an economy where government has refused to pay suppliers, contractors, consultants and others to the tune of over $4 billion. Government is holding people's money to that extent. There is no money already in the economy. The businesses are facing the worst challenge. I was looking at these weekly reports that are done by banks, one from Stanbic. It has clearly stated that the business community, private sector have entered the year again with more challenges. The money supply has affected them badly. They can't fulfill their contractual obligations. If they have new orders, they are failing to pay for those new orders. The development in the country has slowed down. Economic activities in the country have further slowed down by these measures. And you should remember, for Bank of Zambia, he wants to score. The governor simply wants a single-digit inflation. And the more money he sucks out of the economy, the better for him, because there will be less money being spent and the inflation rate will remain a single digit. Should that be the only factor that we should be concerned about? So with those few words, ladies and gentlemen, we will speak to you later with another topic. I thought that today we could tackle the issues of the concession of the port in Namibia, which was recently purportedly cancelled, the issues around the IMF, and the challenges that we're facing in light of the fuel increase and the bank reserve ratio. So God bless you. God bless our country. We shall succeed.
Kasama yuti bonse batinda me abakulu n'abana bonse bashitata n'abana bayo banelila we mwamba kasama ile fire iwe wile webo eshi mwamba later experience olakale wabo mwamba Emmanuel bonse bakasama bale fire mwamba Emmanuel wakasama bakulira tule fire mwamba wewe Emmanuel chipani ni PS tule fire mwamba wewe Mwamba Emmanuel, bonse bakasama, bale fire mwamba Emmanuel.